Hello, I'm going to talk about why Paladins console is so different from PC and how to bring them more in line with each other. The main point I'll be trying to make is that fixing the aiming system should be a top priority. If we were to balance console separately right now, we'd be balancing around a terrible aiming system which, if fixed, would bring console more in line with PC. So, just a quick intro on why I'm making this video. I played Paladins on PC on and off for a while before it was released on console. When it released on console, I started playing on PS4 because I had more friends on PS4, mainly from playing Battlefield 4, and I wanted to introduce some of them to one of my favourite games. The general consensus among us who played it was that it just felt wrong. No matter how we tweaked the settings, it felt like you were constantly fighting with the game to aim where you want. This, in combination with the lack of any info on this online, and my determination to play Mao Dumba on console, caused me to spend a lot of time in the practice range and make 2 text posts on the subreddit and forums. The devs responded to both, but my suggestions never made it into the game. I gave up on console and stopped thinking about this for a while. Recently we've had the Switch release, and I played it on Switch. Koga and an influx of discussion on the differences between platforms, and there's still no good info explaining this in detail. This is something that needs to be discussed now more than ever, and a 4,000 word text post full of YouTube timestamps of visual examples isn't very digestible. Basically, I'm making this video out of pure frustration. So, for starters, I'm going to talk about some things you need to know about stick aiming using these shitty graphs I made in Paint. The one on the left is the angle of the stick. Think of it looking like that on a controller. And on the right is how fast you turn compared to where the stick is. So, dead zones aren't a huge part of the reason the aiming is so bad, but the default settings are weird and there's a lot of misunderstanding about them, so I'll just go over it quickly. When your stick is in the red and green zones, you don't have any control over your aim. Everywhere in the red zone is like you're not touching the stick. Everything in the green zone will make you turn at your maximum speed. I can't see any reason to make these larger, since it just narrows your area of control. I put them at the minimum possible. Sometimes a controller's sticks don't sit in the centre perfectly, so you'll move or aim without touching the sticks. In that case, you need to turn the inner dead zone up a notch. The ramps represent how your turn speed increases as you push the stick further. On the screen is a linear ramp and an exponential ramp. Let's say your speed at full tilt is 4. On a linear ramp, tilting the stick halfway will yield half the speed, because it's linear. On an exponential ramp, with the same maximum turn speed of 4, your turn speed at half speed could be 1. Could be more than 1, could be less, but it will be less than the value from the linear ramp. You can have different types of exponential ramp because there's only one shape a straight line can be, but a curved line can be different shapes. Most games on console use an exponential ramp because it gives better control over smaller adjustments. But we'll get back to that. Turn acceleration is the thing that causes most of the problems. It's probably the most misunderstood setting, and it doesn't help that it functions differently with every turn acceleration mode. In most games, it's called aim acceleration or aim smoothing. I'll explain how it works in general, then later I'll talk about how the slider applies to the different turn acceleration modes in Paladins. So, imagine you're playing any video game. You're pointing a gun forwards, and a sneaky enemy gets behind you and starts to kill you. You're going to want to turn 180 degrees as quick as possible. So, imagine a car at the start of a road that has a speed limit of 60. The car starts speeding up, then he reaches the speed limit and drives the rest of the way at the speed limit. Now imagine another car driving on the same road who speeds up twice as fast, reaches the limit, and drives to the finish. Both are following the same speed limit, but one is going to reach the finish quicker than the other. Which one? The one on the right, because it's been driving faster on average. It spent more time at maximum speed than the other car. Now if the speed limit is your sensitivity, then the aim acceleration is how long it takes you to reach that sensitivity. So if two people with the same sensitivity turn around at the same time, the one with the faster aim acceleration will always turn around quicker. In Paladins, higher turn acceleration values make your turn speed accelerate quicker. Faster acceleration makes your aim more responsive. What I mean by responsive is how much of a delay there is between when you move your stick and when the turn speed correlating to the stick movement is reached. Something to note is that in Paladins, the faster your sensitivity, the more distance your crosshair will cover before you reach your sensitivity value. This means at higher sensitivities you might not have even reached your sensitivity's max speed by the time you turn 180 degrees. I haven't tested this in other games. So in other games, the aim acceleration slider may scale differently. For example, in Overwatch, the slider is the opposite, where 100 gives you the slowest acceleration, and the lower the number, the quicker you speed up. Most other games that have aim acceleration options have a slider that allows for a much more responsive acceleration. If Paladin's acceleration slider went up to 20, it would give us a more responsive option than we have now, assuming it doubles the 10. They also have something very important that Paladins doesn't have, an off value. In Overwatch and other games I've seen, 0 will turn off aim acceleration, meaning your turn speed will match your stick input from the moment you touch the stick rather than after a short delay. It doesn't just affect how quick you turn, it also affects your muscle memory. If you have a PC, you might have heard of mouse acceleration. Mouse acceleration is infamous for being bad for your aim, and the most common explanation is this. With mouse acceleration, instead of just having to keep track of the distance your hand moves, you have to keep track of the distance your hand moves and how fast it moves. This makes your aim less consistent, making it harder to develop muscle memory. Mouse acceleration and stick aim acceleration aren't exactly comparable, but one thing they have in common is that they both add another variable to your aim, making it harder to develop muscle memory. Think about developing your muscle memory for quick turns. If you're turning at a constant speed, so no acceleration, you'll have to learn that to turn 90 degrees, you'll have to you have to have the stick at max tilt for 0.2 seconds, 0.4 seconds for 180, 0.6 seconds for 270, 0.8 for 360. If you have acceleration on, your muscle memory might have to learn to do 0.4 seconds for 90 degrees, 0.7 for 180, 0.9 for 270, and 1 second for 360. It's much easier to train your muscle memory to push the stick for twice as long to turn twice as far than it is to train your muscle memory to push the stick 1.75 times longer for twice as far and 2.5 times longer for 4 times as far. So is there ever a reason to use aim acceleration? I can't see any reason to use it unless you've already gotten used to it and don't want to relearn how to aim, but it does nothing positive for the precision of your aim. So why does it exist? I can't find much info on this, but I think it was a purely visual thing. Console started off with mostly third-person games, and a third-person camera flying around with really sudden movements probably isn't good for motion sickness. Look at how easy on the eyes this footage is. It looks nice. Much nicer to look at than PC footage. So anyway, my guess is that aim acceleration stuck around in first-person games because many games on console are 30 FPS, and 30 FPS with a janky camera is a recipe for vomit. Especially when looking around confined spaces, like when you're browsing bookshelves in Skyrim. So, when competitive online games started becoming more popular on the console, devs just kept implementing aim acceleration simply because it's what most games use. At least that's my guess. But when you play a game without it, where the devs know what they're doing to make the game feel as responsive and natural as they can, you realise how big of a difference it can make. This game for me was Battlefield 4. So, console players, imagine if you could react to a Sky or Koga flanking this fast. Now, in Paladins, obviously it would take a lot longer to kill the flanker, but the quicker you are to be able to return fire, the more chance you have of killing them or scaring them off. Just quickly, auto rotation aim assist, which is aim assist magnet in Paladins, assists you by auto aiming slightly to help you keep on target, like turning your aim. Friction aim assist helps you by slowing down your sensitivity when you are aiming at a target. That first clip I showed didn't use either of the aim assists. This one I'm showing has friction on, but it looks like he tries to turn it off partway through the clip. I'm not 100% on that. So this is one of the servers I used to play in. It felt very competitive, and there are a lot of good players in the community. This footage is from someone who consistently did well, and it's a great example of good stick control overall. So, watch how this guy's aiming. Every time he needs to check behind him or switch targets, his camera is doing these fast, twitchy movements. Then when he's aiming at a target, he uses small adjustments to keep him on target. Keep in mind that there's no aim assist helping him get on target, so every tiny precise movement you see is done using the sticks. There's clearly a big difference between these fast camera movements and the slow precise movements. So I'll call the fast ones quick turns and the small movements adjustments. So for these quick turns, he would be pushing the stick all the way to the outer edge or close to it. There may be only a few milliseconds between a 140 degree turn and a 180 degree turn, but with practice you'll develop muscle memory and it becomes second nature. You know exactly how much you need to push the stick to turn the angle you want, and this is the main way you stay in control when doing quick turns. Turning at a fixed speed and being able to feel how long you need to hold the stick to aim where you want to go. It's different for small adjustments. Obviously there's still an element of timing, but mostly you are depending on your stick control to make the adjustments you need. You want to be able to track players running at different speeds and distances. You want to be able to make small adjustments to hit those criticals. But you also want to be able to make a faster adjustment if they start jumping and sprinting like crazy. To optimize your control when doing these small adjustments, you'll want a lot of your ramp in the adjustment zone, giving you more varied control when tracking or aiming precisely. You don't need a lot of control in the quick turn zone because you'll mostly be using timing to turn different amounts. So, main idea is quick turn movements, you develop muscle memory that relates more to timing, and when making small adjustments, you develop muscle memory that relates more to stick control. How those things complement each other is affected by the ramp, and quick turning is more affected by aim acceleration. Good control over your adjustments when aiming will improve your tracking, making aim assists less needed for rapid fire weapons. But when using semi-auto or single shot weapons, most of the time people don't track their targets by keeping the crosshair on them at all times. They use another technique called flick shotting. I'll explain briefly because it's easy to find information about this. If you're tracking someone who is moving randomly, there'll be a small amount of time when you're reacting to their change of direction, and you have to readjust your crosshair back to the target. If you do this with a slow rate of fire weapon, there's a chance that they'll move just before you shoot and you'll miss. So with flick shotting, you can hover your crosshair near the target, but you are waiting for an instance that you can predict their movement and very quickly flick your aim to the target and shoot when your crosshair passes over them. It's similar to moving your arm to catch a ball and closing your hand at the right time. Instead, you're moving a crosshair to shoot the enemy and clicking at the right time. There was a lot of people blaming the OB53 projectile changes on console, but there's no reason projectiles should be relatively harder to use. If you've played BF4, you would have seen many players capable of leading rockets to shoot tanks and helicopters. But trying to lead smaller targets that you need more precision for is when flick shotting becomes very useful. That's how PC players hit agile targets with Barrack slugs and Charlin's arrows. But the technical limitations for using a controller make flick shotting much less viable on console, right? So this may be an extreme example, but the point is that it's very possible to learn how to flick shot with a controller. I learned to flick shot before I knew what flick shotting was because I spent way too much time using snipers during my time playing Battlefield 4. I was one of the better snipers on the Aussie servers, but this guy whose footage is playing would always kick my ass. After using snipers for hundreds of hours, you slowly find what works, and flick shotting really works. You just need to commit some time to building muscle memory for your flick shots. Yes, of course, it's still not as easy as doing it with a mouse, but it's much more possible than most people assume. But do you know what limitations really make flick shotting much less viable? Aim acceleration. So, what makes Paladins so shit? Why does it control like a shooting minigame in a third-person platformer? The biggest reason is the aim acceleration. Battlefield 4 has no aim acceleration. This allows us to build muscle memory for precise quick turns and flick shots. I explained how it affects quick turns earlier, and it's similar with flick shots. When you flick shot on PC, you are learning the muscle memory of how to swipe and click a certain distance relative to how far you need to move your crosshair on screen. Mouse acceleration messes with this because it adds another variable causing inconsistency. On console, you are learning the muscle memory of the time between pushing the stick and pressing the shoot button. Aim acceleration adds another variable and causes inconsistency, seriously harming your potential to develop muscle memory. This affects quick turns, making the difference between a 180 quick turn and a 90-degree quick turn harder to commit to muscle memory, as well as slowing your overall turn speed by having to speed up to your max sensitivity. On top of acceleration existing at all, Paladin's acceleration is particularly unresponsive. Most other games with acceleration speed up to the sensitivity value much quicker on the default settings than Paladin's fastest acceleration setting. So I was going to explain how the different aim styles worked in this video and provide visual examples, but I didn't realise how long it would take to make this or how long the video would be. So I'm going to go over them briefly. Classic is an exponential ramp and turn acceleration is applied whenever you tilt the stick. Tilt it halfway, it'll accelerate to that speed. Tilt it the full way, it'll accelerate to that speed. Pretty standard. Dynamic is an exponential ramp. It feels kinda similar to classic, but it seems to spike up at the end. Kinda hard to tell. The main thing about dynamic is it only applies acceleration when you are at max sensitivity, not when you're doing smaller adjustments. It also feels like it has faster acceleration. I mentioned I'm a Maudumba main. Well, the only way I could get my heels to land is by doing tiny flick shots using the mid-range of the stick in dynamic. You could probably do the same with precision, if you fiddled around with settings enough. It took ages to learn how to do it without tilting the stick too far into the acceleration zone, and I can't do it anymore after not playing for a while. Precision is weird. It's a linear ramp with no turn acceleration at all when you have the acceleration at 0. As you increase the acceleration, you will accelerate past the max speed up to a higher turn speed, depending on how high the acceleration value is. Precision with 0 acceleration at 200 sensitivity has roughly the same max speed as classic or dynamic at 75 sensitivity. If you turn the acceleration to roughly 4 or 5, the max speed will match the speed of classic or dynamic. You can actually turn off aim acceleration on Paladins if you use precision with 0 acceleration. Too bad it has the worst ramp out of all of the options, so much that it's not even worth it. So I think these ramps could be better. Remember what I was saying about quick turns and small adjustments? Ideally, you want a ramp that gives you lots of control with the adjustments while still being able to go fast. You don't need heaps of control over how fast your quick turns are, because it's more about timing. So you want a ramp that looks kinda like this, but Paladins has an exponential ramp that feels a bit more like this. Not the best, but still better than a linear ramp, which is what precision with 0 acceleration is. If you want a more responsive feel by picking precision with 0 acceleration, you have to sacrifice either quick turns or small adjustments. At low sensitivities, you just can't turn around fast enough, and at high sensitivities your minimum input is stupidly fast, making it impossible to be precise. Aim acceleration in combination with shitty ramps is why it was so hard to aim without aim assist in the first place, causing them to turn it up way too high, giving characters that need tracking with rapid fire weapons a significant advantage over single shot champs. One more thing to note is that the minimum input seems to be relatively high in Paladins. With other games at similar sensitivities, you can make much smaller adjustments when leaving the inner dead zone. This may be a limitation from porting the aiming over from Smite, but I don't know that for sure, I'm just speculating. So the result of all of this is a game where characters with rapid fire weapons are disproportionately advantaged by aim assist, and turning around is made much harder because you need to wait for your camera to speed up to the sensitivity you chose. And choosing a high enough sensitivity makes small adjustments to your aim harder. No wonder Skye was considered overpowered. Look at this. Isn't it painful seeing him slowly turn around in the time it takes me to spray down half of his health bar? Look at how much the game is assisting my aim with this Kinessa. I wasn't touching the stick when I was running towards her. Shouldn't I definitely lose this fight at this point? Not when you understand how to abuse the fact that everyone is crippled by turn acceleration. This is what caused the relative success of Skye on console right from the get-go. So, how would you fix this? Classic gives us the most simple exponential ramp, so being able to turn acceleration completely off while using Classic would be a good start. I'll say this again, I strongly believe nobody benefits from acceleration in the long run. Ramps and sensitivities, however, don't have an ideal setting for everyone. So the best thing we could ask for is a customizable ramp so we can tune the aiming to exactly what we prefer. Overwatch does this by having a slider called Aim Ease In. It's best used in combination with linear ramp, and increasing the ease in value makes your ramp more exponential, so you can make the ramp the exact shape you want. Adding something like this would fit with the trend that started sometime last year of adding elements of Overwatch into Paladins, except this time it would improve the game. If I fantasize about what this would look like in Paladins for a second, imagine another aim acceleration mode being added, where the acceleration slider doesn't control aim acceleration, it controls your ramp. This, or something like it, is exactly what we need in Paladins. So when we as a community complain, or give feedback about the game, we might say something like, the aiming doesn't feel right and we need more settings. The devs get the message that something's wrong, but they can't be sure of what the player is experiencing that they need a change. So when us console players give feedback, we need to specify what we want. We want more settings to personalise our ramps so we can make them feel familiar, and we want more options for aim acceleration. If for some reason you like aim acceleration, a slider that isn't so restricted, and an option to turn it off altogether. Most importantly, we need to specify the settings we want them to add so they don't have to rely on data and testing to figure out what is wrong before they fix it. So please, remember, customizable ramps, better sliders for turn acceleration, and most importantly, the ability to turn acceleration off completely. For any console players still watching, if you want to know what your best options are currently, Dynamic with acceleration 10 gives an exponential ramp with no acceleration until you hit max stick input, so that's good. Fiddle with the sensitivity on that. Precision can give a similar effect with no acceleration until you hit max stick input, except it's a linear ramp and the max turn speed is more controlled by turn acceleration. If you play with the sensitivity to find where you have the most control over small adjustments, then increase your turn acceleration to find a quick turn speed you like. Precision has a lot of potential. I can't recommend Classic because every movement you make is affected by acceleration. Shit. I'm planning to make another video going over the different aim styles in detail and with video examples, so keep an eye out for that on Reddit or whatever forums I posted this video on. or just search it in a month or two. There aren't many YouTube videos going over the Paladin's aim settings on console. If you're watching this after September 2018, I might have a link in the description if I've made the video by now. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching, and I hope I cleared up some misunderstandings. Check the description for links to the gameplay and image sources I used and other videos that will give you more information or examples on what I've covered. Cheers.
Easily saved your support there. It was almost like it wasn't until he died that he got the attention that he needed.
Being able to get a little bit of